like to call this meeting to order. The time is 7:03. Justin?
Joe Abdallah. Here. Greg Kava. Here. Victoria Ceylon. Stephanie Kolnick. I think
Here. I'm here.
She on Zoom?
Yeah, can you hear me?
On Zoom.
Yeah, okay. Angela Macarula.
Here.
Alex McNaughton.
Here.
Justin Ongley. Here. Jen Pody.
Here.
Jane Sargent. Pete Tagley. Mary Weber. And Chris Wade. She on Zoom as well?
She's supposed to be hopping on. So, yeah, she's gonna hop on, but she's not on yet. So, thanks, Justin. Just before we start, I just wanted to, we have to remove from the agenda policy for first read for 411.1. Shipman is removing it as a model policy. So we are not going to be doing it as a first reading. So can I have a motion to remove this from the agenda? Second? Okay, all in favor? All right, so we will not be discussing that. Thank you. We're going to shift now to public comment on agenda items only. I don't see anybody. So that is finished. And now we get to, are we going to move on to the FFA convention first? So that would be Tyler. Not Tyler, Megan. Hi, Megan. Good, how are you?
Good evening, everyone. Tyler Cummings does apologize that he couldn't be here tonight with y'all, so you're stuck with me. I'm Megan Berry. I'm the animal science teacher as well as the lead FFA advisor. And we're here in support of our trip for the National FFA Convention that is coming up in October. So for this trip, we are passing out a couple highlights that we wanted to make sure we touched on tonight. We are really excited. This will be our 4th time attending the National FFA Convention if approved, which means we have been slowly increasing our trip numbers over the past few years. So we are taking more students this year than we've ever taken before. We have 29 students slated, including our FFA officer team, as well as 2 state-winning CDE teams who would be going to compete against other states around the country, as well as about 14 delegates from the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade who would be going just to see the conference and be able to attend some of the workshops and the activities. Something else really cool to highlight is we are excited to be chartering our own bus this year. It is a long ride to Indianapolis, but it is well worth the ride. And I'm going to turn it over to our students to tell you about why this is such an amazing opportunity and why it is worth a 15-hour bus trip. So I'm going to introduce Mina, our vice president of our FFA chapter, who has attended before.
Hi, I'm Mina. So I was able to attend the last 2 times we went to National Convention as well as this year's. And I would say it's just a very fun experience overall to like be able to go and meet new people from like all over the country who all have like one shared common interest. And like it was a good opportunity. They had a ton of like expos and stuff that we were able to attend, like to see colleges and different workshops and stuff. And it definitely helped like bond our team, especially last year, a lot better. And it would be really great if we were able to go again this year.
Hi, my name is Timothy Claprott. This year is going to be my first year being able to go to nationals, and I'm part of the dairy judging team, which is one of the 2 teams who have got the opportunity to go to nationals this year. This is also my first year as an officer, and I'm excited to be able to go on this trip. Just like Nina said, being able to meet people from across the country of similar interests, and I feel like that would be beneficial, getting able to learn from these different people from different viewpoints and just being able to see the different events that the National Convention holds for us.
So we really appreciate your consideration of this trip. I'm available to answer any questions. I've been working to plan it. I'm hoping to get all the pieces together and in motion moving forward. Great question. So on the way out, we are going to stop overnight into Ohio. And then on the way back, we're going to drive the 15-hour straight back because it is homecoming. And the students have expressed that that is a valuable event to them and they would like to be back for that. So our goal is
Hours?
we'll have a relief driver. So we'll meet them somewhere in
Okay.
Pennsylvania.
Okay, that's great.
Megan, I was just hoping you would talk about the events that you mentioned or they mentioned as well.
Absolutely. I'm happy to let them elaborate. I can give you a little bit of framework. So some of the things that our students have done in the past include attending the general session to see the national officer speak. We always have a keynote speaker every year. This year is a motivational comedian. I apologize, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, as well as Temple Grandin at one of the sessions, who is a really recognized animal behaviorist. Students also have the opportunity to attend student workshops, and they explore a career and college fair expo with over 100 vendors that ranges from colleges to industry to military, everything under the spectrum for career interests these students might potentially have in agriculture. As well as getting the chance to meet students from across the country. So one of the big challenges is to get a picture of our jacket with a jacket from every single state and the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, which Mina made a whole video of last year, so she can speak a little more to that. This year is also a first for us because we will be taking 2 winning CDE teams. So Megan Davenport and myself have coached these teams and we will be taking them to their contests at the Indiana State Fairgrounds. So Tim will be spending a day and a half in competitions. And then the meat judging team also spends a full day at the Land O'Lakes Center to see the actual meat processing facility. So I can let Mina elaborate a little further on what she experienced previously.
Yeah, so like last year when we went, a big thing that I made sure, so I was a junior last year, a big thing I made sure to like kind of go and see was that in the expo hall they have a ton of colleges and stuff, and going there actually helped me like pick the, not like the college I'm committed to yet, but one that I would be interested in going to, Purdue. I was able to talk to different like admissions officers there and kind of get to learn more about what they like have to offer. Wow, and it's a nice way to kind of like talk to them without having to like tour the whole campus. And also in terms of workshops, we did different workshops on like resume building, leadership, communication, like all that stuff like that to help us basically become a better team.
Any other questions?
Great, so moved. Second? Great, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Great, well, there you go. Thank you so much. We have to still vote? We can move it up, so then have our motion, please.
Yeah, I get my move, if we approve, trip to the national convention, that's in the action. Great.
Awesome.
Second.
He beat you to it. All in favor? No one's opposed. Now we congratulate you.
Thank you very much.
Take lots of pictures, please. We look forward to you coming back and filling us all in, please, for sure. Thank you so much. Great, thanks. I need Ben's help to get Chris on. because that's- I need to get him. Okay, so next we have Rizzo. Are we gonna have him speak first? Okay, great. So we're gonna go to the planetarium. I'm gonna go talk to Ben and okay, so we're back after that amazing presentation of the planetarium. We're so lucky to have Rizzo. He's amazing, and I felt like we just went on a little bit of a Disney ride. Yeah, it was pretty incredible. I know. It was so interesting. So it's really incredible, and I'm really excited about our students and our community being able to have such a wonderful opportunity.
home after something like that.
I know. There'd be a lot to talk about at the
Yes.
dinner table for sure. I know. So moving on, we're going to talk about the consent agenda, the minutes of the Board of Ed meeting for September 9th. Does anybody want to take anything off the consent agenda? No? Okay, great. Going on to the board's report. I'm just going to talk a little bit about our Saturday retreat. We had a retreat at the Heritage Hotel Conference Center on, as we all know, on Saturday morning. The board's attorney, Tom Mooney, joined us to review the board's roles and responsibilities, which I felt was really a great conversation to have for new board members, but for not new board members. I always feel like I learn something new when Tom comes, and it was a really fruitful conversation. And I want to thank Tom Mooney for joining us. We also talked about the superintendent search and how we would like to that process to unfold. So that was really great to be able to get us all together to have start that conversation. And then lastly, we talked about the 3 elementary schools. It was the first time that we have collectively as a board started that conversation. And so I think that from that conversation, we have decided to create a committee comprised of hopefully the 3 first selectmen, community members, and board members to assist in a survey/plan that we can bring to the 3 towns. I think it's important that for the board to get a sense of how all 3 communities feel about the long list of issues that are facing each of the buildings and how we want to address those issues collectively. I think it's important that we are transparent, inclusive, and thoughtful as we move forward with this very important issue that's facing our district. So I really appreciate the conversation that we had. It was really enjoyable. And it is always, like you said, it's nice to break bread, and over breakfast is really nice too. So thank you all for coming. And I appreciate the positive and productive conversations that we had Saturday. So thank you all very much. And that's it for me.
Okay, so good evening. I shared a letter that I sent to parents today, basically talking, and staff, excuse me, basically talking about the swatting incidents that have occurred and disrupted, I should say, many districts in Connecticut. In some cases, forcing them to close or go into a lockdown. Of course, these false threats are meant to disrupt. That's actually the purpose. But more importantly, I think the greatest damage is the fear and anxiety it creates within the school community. And I have talked to some parents about this over the last couple of weeks. We have security, as we say, at every school now, which has helped, I believe, on many levels. Parents I've spoken to, in particular from the elementary schools, are happy to have our ASOs. And it has definitely provided a higher confidence and security. And I also want to thank Mike Epps, our SRO, and our state troopers who monitor our schools and situations in the neighborhood and keep us alerted to anything out there in neighboring districts or beyond. We also have the first AgriScience advisory meeting tomorrow evening. I know that our own board's AgriScience committee will work collaboratively with that group, reviewing their goals and the work of the group. I do plan on attending this first meeting, and I think this will be a good opportunity to review the membership of all of the sending towns, and we talked about the structure of that committee and how they plan to structure their meetings so that it can be productive and work with us to make improvements in the AgriScience across the entire program. And I really feel that we've had some good conversations, Tyler and members of that committee late last year, to really work on what that looks like moving forward. So I'm looking forward to going tomorrow evening. We've already had our open houses at both Booth and Burnham, which went very well. Always a positive experience for staff and parents to meet one another for the first time. And I heard some really positive feedback from both the principals, and I know we have open house for Chapag coming up next week as well. And then I have one personnel, that's an appointment, and that's John Fisher, who will be the girls varsity basketball coach at Chapag.
Great.
And that's it for me.
Thank
This
you,
evening.
Lori.
You're welcome.
Treasurer's report, Alex?
Yes, and I apologize if I've already reported this. I can't remember, but we ended last school year with a surplus of $16,158.98. So we did not run over, and we have encumbered as of this last meeting just under 300,000, which will be dealt with and paid off. Under no condition, though, will that eat into our that 16,000. You know, that 16,000 can only get better. Kudos to Don O'Leary, who tracked down a Discover. The Frontier was charging us for systems that we weren't using, and we recovered. We discovered a $7,000 charge, and he got an $8,200 credit. And I think I will leave that for the treasurer's report and save the rest for the F&O meeting report.
Thank you, Alex. Committee reports, agri-science, Mary? Great, thank you. Curriculum,
Nothing new. Our next meeting is October 28th.
28, okay. Ed Advance,
Nothing new. Our next meeting is in October.
thank you. Back to Alex.
Okay, just for the F&O, just be aware, we hired a kitchen consultant for $2,500 to help us figure out what we're going to do with the kitchen out here at Chapag, and how to make it so that the meals run more smoothly. Also, Don has got 4 RFPs out, one for the alarm lighting and fire alarm system, one about the doors in the vestibule in the 3 elementary schools. One is an HVA survey, which is mandated by the state, and the booth electrical panel, which was put in by Paul Revere after he did his famous ride. It's that old. The final thing we discussed, and we will be discussing again at the next F&O meeting, is potential tuition increases. And we will bring it to the board for their consideration when we get a little bit more information on our side. That is it for me.
Thank you, Alex. Labor negotiations, Greg? Okay, thank you. Policy, that would be Justin and I. We just met actually earlier, and as we discussed earlier, we had taken off the policy 4111.1 because for first reading rather, because Shipman has taken it down, so we don't need to review it, right? So we went over, I'm just looking at my notes, give me a second here. We reviewed the next one, which was 4218.113, and that one is for the thank you. I'm looking at my things right now. So we reviewed that. And if you look at we have several copies. We have the draft, the revised, the redlined. If you, Lori, want to discuss a little bit of that?
You want to do that now? Or,
Yeah.
Just
For the first
Well,
reading? Yeah.
So yes, we did.
We can just talk about it a little bit later.
So just to talk a little bit about it, because I know it's on the agenda, we did we did review it. So you have the current policy, which by the way was just done about a year ago. But this was revised pretty extensively by Shipman. And you'll notice it is really because of new language. You'll see a lot of blue, which means additional, and a lot of red, which means they've pulled it out. And you'll see terms like sex-based rather than sexual harassment. And you'll see they've pulled in a lot more definitions and widening the scope of what that discrimination can look like for gender identity, there's a whole host of conditions that apply with that. So we'll review, it's for your review, but we give you all three. So you see the current, the red line, and then the final version that Shipman has given us. And it's for your review, at least for first read.
Thanks, Lori. Okay, now strategic long-range planning. So we met last Monday. Yes. And actually it was a really great meeting. We really just were updated by Carrie and Lori about how the strategic plan is going. And I feel like each time that we meet and we talk about it in depth, it really brings it to life and to color, which is really fascinating. And I know that it's always so fun to check the boxes of things that have been accomplished as we're moving on. But I just really appreciate the effort that everybody is making and working towards the same goal. So it's been really enjoyable. So thank you. And Carrie, if there's anything else that you want to add or share, but I just think that it was really wonderful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Great. Well, thank you so much. Okay, so we are now moving on to new business, climate survey with Carrie and Lori.
I can, do you want me to go up too? I guess I'll do my part. I'm just doing sort of the overview in the beginning and then Carrie's presenting the data. But as you are all aware, we conducted a climate survey in May of the last school year to use as baseline data. And I really want you to hear that it is baseline data. It's the first one we had done in several years or so, primarily for continuous improvement efforts, which are outlined in our strategic plan. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. We had, as I said, had not conducted a survey like this in a few years. So this was certainly a necessary step and something we could use as a measure for improving our ability to listen to the voices of our staff, our students and parents in order to implement positive change. And kudos to all the participation. I know we have Tara Flaherty, the union president, for the teachers in the audience and many on Zoom, because this is something that everyone wants to take seriously and it's important. How else can you improve unless you ask the stakeholders their input and for their feedback? So I just want to impress that on everyone. And so we plan on doing more and we'll get to that as well. If you go on to about our survey, I just wanted to say Panorama, and I've used it in other districts, so I'm very well aware of what a reputable tool this is and used in many districts. It has the thousands of districts, and it has the ability to represent various subgroups and their responses across a host of questions in various categories related to climate and safety. More importantly, as Carrie will share in a few moments, it also allows districts to look at how their responses measure up against national norms. So that's what makes this particular tool something that I think is really useful. And it does provide additional meaning when you're able to look at not only yourself and how you're doing as a district, but also what the trends are nationally. And then just a few words about their objective. It is to help improve, that's their ultimate goal, is to help districts improve student outcomes. And the organization does include a large team of educators, software developers, designers, and researchers, and Panorama's headquarters is located in Boston, so they're not that far away. I mentioned their mission is to allow for the voices of school community members to be heard and use that information, or for districts to use that information, and to take that feedback and turn it into actual priorities and actions. And that aligns well with our own mission, because if we want to challenge and inspire students, as it states, if we want them to be compassionate and courageous and empowered by knowledge, and also if you see our mission, it mentions character as well, then we need to listen to ongoing concerns and input about the climate and culture of our school community, so those things can occur. And most significantly, if you just move the slide, the implementation of a climate survey tool is directly linked to our strategic priority number 3, diversity, belonging, and well-being. So just so you know, the surveys were distributed in the past spring in May to families, to students in grades 3 through 12, and all of our staff, both certified and non-certified. Questions, and you have the entire survey in front of you and all the questions, but the questions ranged from general climate to barriers to student engagement in school, safety, resources, professional learning, and well-being. Participation included 110 families, 521 students, and 163 staff members total. Again, as this was only our first time, and we will be using this again beyond just this baseline data, we plan on continuing to increase participation through reminders and giving again time for students and staff to take part and respond. We plan on scheduling 2 per year. That was the first one, as I mentioned, but we plan on doing 1 in the early winter, somewhere around November, December, and most likely the second one in May.
Good evening, everybody. So we're going to take a look at the data. You have received data packets for each school, sort of summaries for each school. So what I'm going to talk about right now in the next couple of slides is referring to the information that you're seeing in the school summaries that you received. So I just want to point that out to you. And go ahead to that next slide. So I wanted to tell you, as you're taking a look at the summary of the data for each school, there are a few important facts to keep in mind. The first is this definition of something you're going to see called percent favorable. Percent favorable, for example, an 81% favorable answer means that 81% of the respondents selected a favorable answer choice for a question, or that 81% of the responses across all the questions in a topic were favorable. Most often, the top 2 answer choices are favorable for a question with 5 choices, and the top 3 are favorable for a question with 7 answer choices. So I think this is an important thing to just point out. Whatever this question, how excited are you about going to this class? There were 5 answer choices. Only the top 2 answer choices are considered favorable. The bottom 3 would be in the unfavorable. So as you're looking at responses, and I'll pull out a couple of these graphs to illustrate this for you, but I just think that's an important information for you to have as you're sort of looking at some of this data. All right, next slide. Panorama's national data set includes over 2,000 school districts, which represent over 25,000 schools across the United States. These are the schools to which our schools are compared in the summary of the data.
And so again, when you're going to see a information about comparing our results to results nationally, and I just wanted to make sure you understood when you see that any kind of percent favorable score you're seeing is being compared nationally to those 25,000 other schools across the United States. And so you'll see where our scores fall in terms of percentile as related to the national data set. And that was one of the reasons we chose Panorama. We wanted to be able to sort of compare ourselves to the national data set. So I think that's a valuable thing for us to be keeping an eye on as we're moving through. All right, one last slide before we dive into Region 12 specific data. Finally, it's important to see that the trends in the national data set across the United States in many of the categories in our survey, the favorable responses declined from elementary school into middle school and high school. Some of our data follows a similar trend. So this was information that Panorama provides, just saying nationally, when you look at some of these, they picked out a few categories to share. The data there's often sort of a downward trend in climate data as you move from elementary to middle school. And that you'll see some of that in our Region 12 data. It follows that national trend. Okay, next slide. So we have so much data from the survey. Our leaders and our teachers have really just begun analyzing the information and planning to improve our climate. And so here are some big picture sort of takeaways from the data. So overall, when you look at all of the data together, our students answered positively about our school's rigorous expectations. This was across the board, and our school safety, and less positively about their engagement in their schoolwork. That's something these are sort of big picture, district-wide trends that we saw. Our families report that they do not feel many barriers to engagement. They feel that they are very well able to engage in their child's school. But they report concerns about their child's learning behaviors at home. And we'll look at one of those a little more closely in the upcoming slides. And our teachers and our staff answered positively about their well-being and their school's climate. And they answered a little less positively overall about their professional learning and the resources that they access at work. So those are broad strokes, sort of district-wide pictures. One more slide. Each school has taken a look at the data and identified strengths and areas for improvement from this baseline survey. In the next several slides, we're going to take a look at just a few examples of each school's data and share some of the plans they have developed so far to build on strengths and improve in areas that require improvement. So I can't emphasize that enough. There's a lot of data that everyone is looking at. It would take us hours and hours to look at it all together. What I'm about to show you is just sort of samples of the kinds of things that they're looking at and talking about. All right, so starting with Chapag, we're gonna go school by school and starting with strengths. So the school leaders have identified, looking at the data, that school safety and school rigorous expectations were areas of strength for us overall. And this is specifically students reporting about school safety. And that topic had a 60% favorable response rate. On the next slide, and by the way, if you're looking at the Chapag summary, just in case you wanted to look at it, that's on page 3 of the Chapag summary. This specific topic, if that's helpful to you. Next slide. I thought it would be helpful for you to see some of the questions that students were asked within the category of school safety so that you have a little bit of a sense of what students were looking at. So here are a couple of examples. How likely is it that someone from your school will bully you online? How often do you worry about violence at your school? At your school, how unfairly do the adults treat the students? How often do students get into physical fights at your school? So those were some of the questions. There were actually more, but this is a sampling of them. Next slide, we're gonna zoom in on this one. How likely is it that someone from your school will bully you online? I want to point out this favorable part, because this is where I think it can get confusing. You might look at that and say 60% of kids said, yes, it's likely that I'll be bullied online. That's actually not true. When you see favorable, they were favorable towards a positive climate, meaning if you look at the graph, you can see this more clearly. 34% of kids said they're not at all likely to be bullied online. 26% slightly likely. 21% said somewhat likely. 13% said quite likely. And 6% said extremely likely. So overall, more students said they're really not very likely to be bullied online, which is how we have a 60% favorable response. I just want to pause there in case anybody has a question, because I do think this could be confusing if you really don't know the story behind the data.
Just so you know, Carrie and I spoke with Panorama on that very thing, and I've used the tool before, and they even said, yes, we'll bring it back. We've looked at it because they have, people on staff who are constantly taking in feedback. And it's hard when you're putting this on a slide and you're seeing 80%, 60%, and you see favorable, your mind just isn't used to thinking that way, right? So hopefully they might even change the question so it makes more sense to go with the percentage. Right. That's all you have to do is switch it around. So
They would be more likely that they'd say, how many of you would not think that you would be bullied, rather than the way that they've asked it.
That's right.
So another way of saying this would be that 40% feel that they will be bullied.
Or either somewhat like or extremely likely to be bullied. 60% of kids said not a good chance that we would be bullied.
So, well, okay, so the quite likely and extremely likely, that's still 19%.
Yeah.
Kind of a high number.
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like there's a positive tone to this, and I don't need to bring it down, but 19% means the world to the kid who's getting bullied.
1000%. Yes.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, having attended the ADL presentation, I can tell you these numbers are not surprising to me at all. Not at all, because we heard a lot about this from there. I just had another question though. When you talk about this percentage, this comparison to national standard, you said there are 25,000 schools systems, I assume.
2,000 school districts,
2,000
which
school
represent
districts.
25,000 schools.
All right. So how do they select these, or are these just the people that use Panorama?
These are people that use Panorama.
So would it be a fair inference? That's what I thought. So would it be a fair inference to say that school districts that engage in these kind of things do it because they're interested in trying to have a good school climate? And so could it possibly be that these are perhaps the schools where the climate's better? And that maybe when you say we're 60th, if we were to compare ourselves to the country as a whole, we might be in the 93rd percentile.
Yeah, we do not know. I mean, I think, in Connecticut, we're mandated to give climate surveys. We don't have to choose Panorama to do that. How many other states mandate a climate survey? How many other schools choose Panorama? So I think those are interesting questions. I don't know that I could speculate on that, but.
All right. So it sounds like we should be less concerned about what the percentage number we fall in, and more concerned about what the specific answers are to the questions.
Right. I mean, I think the percentile, our national comparison, is something we should consider, but I also think we as a district should make our own decisions about where we think we need to improve. I think that it comes back to what we think is important. I agree with you. Okay. So next slide. Now here's where the sort of this is where our thoughts come in. So that was data that I just shared with you about school safety at Chapag. Here is where the leaders and the teachers have started thinking about what can we do about that. And this was a relative strength. That whole category of school safety was a relative strength. But we want to capitalize on our strengths as aspects of school climate and build on them even further. We don't want to say, oh, well, that's a strength, so we don't need to worry about that. To Justin's point, there are still some data points within that category that we should be looking at. So Chapag has plans to keep safety as a top priority and to maintain the positive feelings that students have about their school. And these were just some ideas that the initial thoughts as they've started to look at that they're gonna keep working on to keep that positive feeling about school safety going. So next we're going to move on to an area for improvement for Chapag specifically. So we're going to go school by school, strength, area of improvement, strength, area of improvement. So now we're working on area of improvement. So again, the leaders have identified a few areas as areas for improvement. These aren't all, this isn't the be all end all list, but upon first looking at it in our first conversations, these were some areas. And this is a different group. Notice this is a data point from staff, not from students. The last data point was from students. This is from staff. And the category I'm going to go into a little deeper here is on school leadership. So on the next slide, you'll see within the category of school leadership, here are some of the questions that were asked. Overall, how positive is the influence of the school leaders on the quality of your work? How effectively do school leaders communicate important information to staff? How knowledgeable are your school leaders about what is going on in the school? How responsive are school leaders to your feedback? How effective are the school leaders at developing rules for students that facilitate their learning? And again, this is not the entire list of questions. There are other questions within this category. On the next slide, I'm going to just go a little deeper into one of those questions. How effective are the school leaders at developing rules for students that facilitate their learning? And then you can see there the graph that of responses, right? How this represents 21, 22, 23, 24 teachers responded, and that is the graph that came out of that. So on the next slide, again, what are some plans for improvement? The Chapag leaders had an initial conversation with staff on one of the first days of school and talked about this area that definitely needs improvement. And one thing that really came out was this issue about rules. And one particular issue that came up was about, this new emphasis on cell phone use in schools. This has become a sort of a hot topic this year in a lot of different schools and school districts. And so they talked a little bit about how the leadership could be helpful in supporting teachers in, making rules clear and supporting them in enforcing rules. And so here were some of the things that they talked about early on. Notice in this last bullet, they're going to continue to hold focus groups. They're going to continue to talk about this. Again, I'm not presenting this as the be all end all. This is all that's happening. These were the initial steps. More is going to come out of these focus groups. That's going to lead them further into improvement areas. Yeah.
It seems like the graph, it seems very troublesome. I mean, if you look at, you've got almost 90% of the people, you've got a third of them saying it's not at all effective, a third saying it's somewhat, and the third saying it's quite effective. That seems like an odd distribution, and it makes me wonder if people are not getting equal access or not perceiving things in the right way. It's just that it's weird to have basically evenly split that way.
Yeah. I think the focus groups are going to bring more to light. This is just, these kinds of surveys give you a place to start in terms of your investigation. I think those focus groups are going to be able to help the leaders understand a little more about how this came out. Yeah.
Well, and that's a good point, because that leads when they sit with the staff, why is it not clear to everyone? What are we doing better yet, what could we do better to clarify our expectations?
So again, go ahead. It also feels to me that there's a clear disconnect at some point, right? So there's a large percentage equal, which I thought the same thing, Greg, when I saw it, that there's a very clear disconnect that I appreciate focus groups, but it feels to me pretty dire to me that you have such large discrepancies between the two groups. So that's just something that I hope that you're able to dive in deeper, but not at a later time, but really just start figuring it out sooner. Like you're talking about the focus groups, but how often is that happening? Like what's the timeline in that?
Another possibility that occurs to me is, could there possibly be a disagreement over what constitute effective rules to facilitate student learning? Is that maybe the reason why you have this three-way split? Some people think you're not effective, not because you can't speak. They think you're not effective because they don't agree with the rules that you've come out with. That could possibly be you've got disagreement. And because if that's the case, it's an entirely different approach to deal with it than it is if we've just got people not perceiving things right.
Which is again why the focus groups are key, because that is going to really allow staff to share more specific details about this.
Would this have anything to do with the fact that there's four schools that have been asked the question? Four schools with four different, was it staff or teachers?
This data only represents Chippewa staff.
Okay.
We're doing, we are looking district-wide, like I gave you some district-wide things that need to be looked at, but in these slides, we're breaking down by school. But good question, yeah.
This looks like one of the questions where not every teacher answered. Did you come up with any conclusions as to why that would, what happened there?
Nope, not yet.
So I think the focus groups will be good because you also don't know how they're interpreting this question. Like when you go back to the prior question to the students, how likely are you to be bullied online? In my mind, I'm thinking if you're a kid in 2024, you're going, well, yeah, if I get bullied, how else am I going to get bullied but online? Because that's what kids see, cyberbullying. So they might not be saying, 34% or whatever might not be saying, oh, I'm likely to get bullied. They're saying, well, if I ever do get bullied, it's obviously going to be over my computer because how else would anybody bully me? So I think that's where the focus groups, will be important.
Yes, there's so much about climate surveys that require interpretation and by the person, answering the question. I think it's so important to sort of get a high level of where do we need to focus our time and energy, and then get more information before you're taking too much action, because you really want to get to the bottom of some of that. Yeah. All right, so we're going to move on to Booth Free School and the three elementary schools, Booth, then Burnham, then Washington, and do the same thing. We're going to take a look at a strength that the leaders have identified, and then an area for improvement, and go through the same sort of set of slides. All right, so Booth Free School, a couple of strengths identified. And we're going to take a deep dive into student response, which was on school belonging. Ben, can you just go back for 1 minute? I just want to let you know, when I noticed today that this was the incorrect graph on the original presentation that was sent to you on Friday. That has been replaced. So if you are looking at the digital version of this graph, you are seeing the correct one, which is this one. But if you printed that slideshow out on Friday, it's the graph that was on this slide is incorrect. Okay, go ahead. So when we think about school belonging, here were some of the questions. How much support do the adults at your school give you? How well do people at your school understand you as a person? How much respect do students at your school show you? Overall, how much do you feel like you belong at your school? Just a quick reminder, these were given to students in grades 3 through 5, not K through 5, 3 through 5 students. So digging into more specific information about the questions within a category can bring to light where strengths exist and where adjustments can be made to make an area even stronger. So we're diving into this one question a little bit. Overall, how much do you feel like you belong at your school? Here's how the students in grades 3 through 5 at Booth Free School responded. You can see the numbers and the percentages. And then on this last slide, so again, we want to be building on strengths. The Booth Free School leaders and teachers want to build on the students' strong sense of belonging even further. And so they have a few ideas. Yeah.
Are third graders filling this out on their own?
They were in their class with their teacher's guidance.
Oh, so
These are computer-based, but yes, each child filled out his or her own survey.
but some of these questions are a little complex, I would
Yep.
think, for a third grader to sort of figure out what's meant.
It's true. And I do think that the teachers were guided to give as little interpretive support as possible and just sort of a lot of do the best you can, whatever you think is the right answer, just to not sway students in either direction. They were supposed to just be very encouraging for students to do their best. All right. Then we move on to a Booth School area for improvement. The leaders have identified a few areas of improvement for Booth School. And we're going to zoom in on a students, and school engagement. And I will just say engagement was identified as an area for improvement at all of our schools. It's a topic we're working on together as a district to understand and to identify strategies to improve. So a little deeper dive into school engagement. Here are some of the questions. I'll just read one or two. How excited are you about going to your classes? In your classes, how excited are you to participate? When you're not in school, how often do you talk about ideas from your classes? Specifically, diving into how excited are you about going to your classes? This was the graph that represents the responses from the students. And then, here is a plan for how they're starting to work on school engagement. They have some ideas about making sure that school is engaging as possible. And they're going to continue to study strategies, and we all are as a district, because this was an area that I think across the district that we need to be working on. All right, Burnham School. Some strengths that were identified. I think maybe this might be the first data point we're talking about when we're zooming in on a family response. So just calling your attention to that. Families reporting that barriers to engagement were not primarily difficult to overcome. So looking at a couple of questions within that category, here are some. How big of a problem is the following issue for becoming involved in your child's current school? That's repeated over and over again. The first one says childcare needs. The second one says transportation related challenges, concerns about getting to the school safely, how busy your schedule is. So you can see how parents responded, and this is just at Burnham School, remember. Next slide. We deep dive into how big of a problem is the following issue for becoming involved with your child's school, childcare needs. Here was the list of responses. And so to build on this strength, Burnham School wants to continue to enhance their partnerships. And one thing that they've started to do is provide some childcare for events at school, and they want to make sure that they continue to do that because that's shown to be helpful. For improvement, they've identified a few areas for improvement. And again, this is one. Professional learning came up as an area for improvement at all of our schools. It's going to require efforts at both the school and the district level for teacher and staff. So that's certified teachers and non-certified staff, both. We need to work on that. So here are some questions. I'll just read a few. At your school, how valuable are the available professional development opportunities? Through working at your school, how many new teaching strategies have you learned? Overall, how much do you learn about teaching from the leaders at your school? And doing a deep dive into just one of those questions, how much input do you have into individualizing your own professional development opportunities? Here's the graph that came out of that. And so this is something that we definitely want to pay attention to and are already doing so. On the next slide. I will just say a lot of these plans that are here for Burnham are actually happening, across the district, giving teachers more control over their learning plans, which is part of our new teacher evaluation plan, sharing opportunities for professional development outside of the district, and seeking input from educators regarding PLC agendas, grade level meetings, and professional development day agendas. Yep.
Okay. Just explain the graphs a little bit to me. Are the any graph, it doesn't matter. Is the sort of the swale, is that national? And then I'm looking at the first one in Washington primary.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter which one.
Go back one more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the blue is national.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't print in color, so
The blue represents the spread of the national data set, and then this is where
we are
all compared to the national data set.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, I think we can go to Washington primary. And so last school to talk about some strengths that have been identified over here on the left, zooming in on a staff response around teacher efficacy. Teacher efficacy is the belief that teachers have that they can make a significant difference in a child's learning. Research shows that this belief is strongly correlated with academic success for students. So a few specific questions within this category. How effective do you think you are at managing particularly disruptive classes? How confident are you that you can meet the learning needs of your most advanced students? When one of your teaching strategies fails to work for a group of students, how easily can you think of another approach to try? That's a sampling of the questions within this category. And so diving deep into that one, when one of your teaching strategies fails to work for a group of students, how easily can you think of another approach? And here was how the Washington primary teachers responded. And so building on that strength, here are some thoughts about continuing to provide opportunities for staff in terms of professional learning and integrating instructional practices that engage students in the learning process. And then the last set of slides for Washington Primary School, areas of improvement. Zooming in on another family response, and this was something families were sharing concerns in this category about their child's learning behavior in the home. This was across the district. Washington Primary School is going to work with families to support them in this area. Here are some questions. How motivated is your child to learn the topics covered in class? When working on school activities at home, how easily is your child distracted? How often does your child give up on learning activities that he or she finds hard? That's a few of the questions in this category. And doing a deep dive, on average, how well does your child work independently on learning activities at home? Here was the distribution of answers from the Washington primary families, you can see. And then their plan for improvement. They have a couple of ideas about helping families tackle these types of things, which is not easy because they're talking about things that are going on at home, but they still felt like it was worthwhile to try to support parents the best they could with this. So the last slide with information from me is I just wanted to call your attention to a few district-wide initiatives where we are tackling some of the more district-wide issues that we saw across schools. You know, we started our Teaching and Learning Council, and they are beginning to develop vision of a learner, which I think will address some of these categories. Our Professional Development and Evaluation Committee, our PDEC committee, we've got paraeducators as members on that committee to help with the planning for professional learning. And we're working with our new educator and leader evaluation plan, which will get at some of this. We're also, you know, we just experienced the planetarium. We talked about how that's an example of the primary partnerships, opportunities for elementary kids to come on up to Chapag. That's just one example that we hope is going to also promote student engagement and learning. And then, you know, just a quote about school climate from two well-known researchers in this area. When we have a positive school climate, it improves academic achievement, test scores, grades, and engagement, and it helps reduce the negative effects of poverty on academic achievement. It's important to pay attention to our school climate. That is all I have. I'm happy to take any other questions. I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm still hung up on the 33% of teachers who say that school rules aren't effective. Is another conclusion that the teachers are saying that the school rules, some teachers are saying school rules don't facilitate learning? And then if that's the case, like, what would an example of a rule be? I mean, is this something like how there's no unified late work policy? I mean, the teacher in me is really struggling to have a concrete example of what this would look like, because these are terrible numbers.
The example that they have just started talking about was the cell phone policy. That was a rule that the teachers felt like they needed more help in understanding and enforcing and getting more leadership support around that. And so the leaders have made plans for supporting in that with that specific rule. That's the only example I have for you now.
Okay.
But I do think that the focus groups are going to bring more examples to light. I hope they do.
Well, thank you for bringing these surveys to the board. There's certainly a lot to look at, and I look forward to more conversations as you get more of the focus groups together, Greg.
Yeah, I just had something. You talked about this additional information from focus groups that you're getting. How does this process work? When do those occur? And when might you be back to us with more
That's right.
specifics?
I don't have a schedule of when that's happening because the leadership at the school's running that, but I certainly can find out, and I certainly am happy to come back and provide an update when there is an update available.
Okay, so that's something that'll probably happen this year, you think?
Oh, almost definitely.
And so you may be back to us before the end of the year with a more detailed,
Most definitely.
where some of these things led.
Most definitely, we can keep updating, and we're going to do another climate survey at the end of November and the beginning of December. So we will have some fresh data to report on, which doesn't mean that everything's going to be resolved by then. That's not the case, but we'd like to see some improvement in some of these areas. And that will again point us in the direction. Are we moving in the right direction?
Excellent work, Terry. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I'd like to have some sort of timeline actually of what that would look like, just so that we have a sense of how it's going to be throughout the year, how you're going to be moving forward with that. So
Sure,
if you
we
could
can
do
work
that,
on that.
that would be really great. Yep. Jane?
The notion of parents dealing with kids and homework, it's ongoing. Was there any discussion coming up about the idea of flipped classroom?
That specific example was from elementary school. And so in elementary school, it's a little more challenging to do a flipped classroom model because students aren't bringing their devices home, which doesn't mean some elements of it could not maybe. I do not know if that specific idea has been discussed, but it's certainly something that I can make sure that the principals are thinking about.
Anyone else? No. Carrie, thank you for doing a wonderful job presenting. I know that can be a little challenging presenting.
Thanks
some
for
hard
being
data.
good listeners. It's a lot of information. in
Well,
this.
we really appreciate it. So thank you. Okay. Moving on to the next is to consider, if appropriate, approve the field trip request to the Wyndham Tolland 4-H camp, Pomfret Center. Is anybody going to discuss that? Or do you know anything about it? Do we have it in the packet?
No.
I don't see it in the packet. No. Not. I don't see it in our packet. Should we have to table it?
Well, it's coming up pretty quickly
The
though.
October 21st, to the 26th, but we are having one on October 7th. Right? We can discuss it then.
I don't see it.
I mean, I'm sorry, the 7th, 17th and 18th, but we're still going to be here. Does that mean is that going to be?
Yeah, it's problematic. It shouldn't happen. I don't know why it's in there.
It's okay.
You didn't have it in your packet.
We
so
did
I don't
not.
have it in mine.
Greg?
I'm gonna move that we approve this field trip. I think it'd be nice if we had a little more information, but somehow the idea of seventh and eighth graders going to a 4-H camp
Seems pretty harmless.
center seems not only, well, it also seems really good because it kind of dovetails in with the ag science program that follows afterwards. So I kind of think that I don't have a problem with it.
Great. Second? Great. All in favor of sending?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay. Anyone opposed? All right. Well, thank you, Greg, for doing that. I appreciate it. And we are now going to consider for a first read policy 4218.113, which is something we discussed earlier. As you all have in your packets, we have the redlined, the current, and the revised. Obviously, we are discussing, the red line is just basically updating the language based on the current statutes.
Well, yeah, just yeah, I've said some of it before, but I just wanted you to kind of pay attention. I talked about how they really widened the scope of this. And if you look on page 2, you'll see what I mean by that, just in outlining sex-based harassment, quid pro quo, including that hostile environment, what conditions meet that. I was talking about that as sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, stalking. That is all new language and put into this. So pay attention to all of those things that are new. And it has really kind of made the scope much broader than it was before. And you can see that from our current policy. Greg, the difference.
Yeah, I see that the policy is broader, but isn't this all stuff that's developed over the course of time? And therefore, that should have been in the policy because this helps people understand a little better what the problem is.
It's a good point. I think it was Justin, we were talking about this earlier, that to give clarity, that's exactly why that happened.
But there's nothing in here that, to me, that looks like it's new.
Well, they've changed terms,
A few terms, different-
sex-based,
right.
that kind of thing, and things that are in here that weren't before. So yeah, it is an addition, but it's only to clarify the basic policy itself. You're absolutely
Right, but I
right.
mean, something like when you add stalking to the definition, that's nothing new. I mean, we've known that that's a problem, or most people have known that's.
Well, but that wasn't part of the action. You're right. But when it comes to this particular policy, that wasn't included or clarified. So my sense is, and you're an attorney, so I'm sure you know, my sense is that some of those cases that were coming forward were, did it really fit the policy at hand? And I think that's why they added it.
Oh,
If
no,
you know what I mean?
Agreed. That's exactly what should be done.
It's a larger umbrella, right? Yep. Justin, did you want to say anything? Oh, you didn't. I thought you had your hand up. Okay, so anybody else have any questions? For first read? Fred?
I'll move we adopt it for first read.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Great. I think we are at the end of the line. I'd like to have a motion to adjourn. Second? All right, all in favor? Let's go. Thank you all so much.